An ebullient Elias B here with your next installment of Madmen Cross the Water. The adventures of the sons of Town Hall. Tales of wonder and woe, of magic and mystery.
Madmen cross the water to get from A to B. Madmen cross the water, just you wait and see.
Why so ebullient, you wonder? Well, you see, this past week our letterbox was full of mail. That's right, full! How big is your letterbox, you ask? OK, fine, not very big, but still it was full. And one of the letters was from none other than Mark Zapata, coach of the Tulsa Under-10 Little League baseball team, the Tulsa Swingers. Heard of the Swingers? I know that's a somewhat dubious name for a children's sporting team, but no bother. Why did the esteemed Coach Zapata of Tulsa, Oklahoma write to yours truly, you wonder? Well, I'll read it.
Send in your letters, send in your love for the attention of Elias B.
Dear Elias, I know you're busy.
Well, not so busy.
I am the coach of the Tulsa Swingers. We compete in the Greater Tulsa Under-10 League. This hasn't been the best season for us. In fact, we're 1-8, and the one win was due to a forfeit. But the boys and I have been listening to your stories before our games for inspiration. It hasn't worked yet, I'll be the first to admit, but I still believe that the teamwork George and Josiah display is good for the kids to learn about. I'm writing because I think I need more to turn our season around, and so I'm wondering if the Sons of Town Hall might be available to sing the national anthem and maybe give the boys a little pep talk before next week's ball game. I know it's a long shot and might be too short notice, but as I tell my players, the answer is surely no if you don't ask. Here's hoping. Coach Zapata.
Send in your letters, send in your love for the attention of Elias B.
Well now, Coach Z, if I may call you that, what an honour that would be, and I know the Sons of Town Hall would be there if they could. But sadly the boys are no longer in Tulsa. In fact, I'm not sure where they are at the present moment, which actually is somewhat concerning. But to your point, I'm afraid we shall have to decline. Still, we are tickled by the offer. We really are. But your letters aren't the only reason for my unseasonably buoyant mood today. You see, once Mr. Craster of Craster's Caskets, generous sponsor of our last episode, spread the word about the impressive uptick in his casket sales in the wake, forgive the pun, of his advertising with us, we've received another offer of patronage. And so, I'm sitting more comfortably today than on any day in recent memory as I say once again, let us pause for a word from our sponsors.
Is your bum bothering you? Are you one of the thousands suffering from harsh toilet tissue? Why settle for sandpaper on your softest parts? The perfect perforated paper is here at long last. Murdoch's Medicated. Don't waste your time or your tush on anything less. Pick up a roll today and let Murdoch's Medicated paper wipe away all your worries.
Murdoch's medicated paper, wipe your worries away.
Wipe your worries away.
Thank you, Murdoch, and thank you again, Mr. Craster. Happy to be mentioning his casket business alongside Murdoch's paper, for our tale today includes death-defying danger, so scary you may well soil yourself. And it also contains, well, death that wasn't defied. It's yet another curious and oft-overlooked chapter in the long and storied career of the Sons of Town Hall, a chapter so rich with colour that it may actually take 2 instalments in the telling. We begin our first episode after George and Josiah were chased out of Oklahoma and then got stuck for months trying to get out of Texas. At long last, our undaunted duo found themselves, where maybe they should have been all along, wandering the mossy back alleys of New Orleans. This would have been, let's see here, during the wet and unusually warm month of April of 98. The Crescent City spoke to them, and it didn't take long for them to feel that they were among their people. To hear them tell it,
the proximity to the water, the bizarre mix of dialects and undecipherable accents, the fashion sense, the libertine ladies, the sounds of the trolley cars and trombones, the belief in voodoo.
It all made us feel quite at ease, and we fell in rather quickly with a fortune-teller named Philomena, who gave us lodging in a caravan behind her shack in exchange for evening entertainment, and, more significantly, our skills as pickpocketers, which we learned from our years running with the gypsies in Granada.
These skills naturally helped provide Philomena with tips and tidbits about her clients, and so for a while the business was more lucrative than ever. She had an old Victrola, and the three of us would sit on the back porch and listen to the scratchy 78s mingling with the raucous hum of the crickets.
But that relationship with Philomena got confusing, and ultimately, like so many other relationships of theirs, went south. And when you're in New Orleans, it's hard to get much further south. The lads once again found themselves with that familiar feeling of being short on options and long on needs. After several weeks falling asleep on what they thought was dry ground, only to find themselves half submerged upon waking, the boys were ready for just about anything. And when they saw the colourful wheat-pasted posters being slapped on the sides of the saloons, our pioneering partners thought that perhaps, at long last, their ship had come in.
The circus was coming to town, you see. Close all the schools, ring the bells, shout it from the towers.
Surely all sorts of workers would be needed to set up the tents, to sell the concessions, to keep the animals fed and watered.
And so the boys cleaned up as best they could in the brackish waters of the Delta and headed down to the station to meet the arriving rail cars. They smelled and heard that train far before they saw it. The elephants, the lions, the clowns, the contortionists, the bearded ladies. They say the circus appeals to all ages, and indeed it was hard, particularly for George, to contain his excitement as the train pulled in. But it wasn't until the Acrobat, who they later learned was named Ella, stepped quietly and gracefully down from the third car from the end that the boys were forever changed, mesmerized by the magic and mystery of this wild and wonderful world.
She was quite the shining sight, with freckles on her blushing cheeks and braids of marigold.
She wore a skin-tight sequin suit of purple and fishnets that revealed all of her curves and then some.
Ella stirred us in ways we'd not been stirred before, and it took us a minute to compose ourselves, and then another minute to notice just how short she was.
Standing a mere 1.5 meters in slippers, Ella was like some sort of carefully crafted china doll. Stunning but fragile, exotic but innocent, seductive yet reserved.
So distracted were they by this vision in violet that they didn't even realize initially that Ella was being escorted, held by her pearly hand, if you really need to know, by a tall, dark, and devastatingly handsome man in an ink-black top hat and matching mustachio. He would prove to be the master of ceremonies and went by the name Mario. Upon first seeing his tall stovepipe and intimidating facial hair, naturally our friends felt jealous and shabby in comparison. It was the first time either had seen such a hat or such a moustache, and Josiah felt that his current hat and his current moustache were inadequate. He vowed then and there to grow his moustache out and to one day be able to afford a taller hat. Mario's eyes were black like his hat and his moustache, and they scanned the crowd quickly and anxiously, it seemed, perhaps out of some kind of protective instinct for the delicate damsel whose hand he held. He caught sight of the boys, but only for a dismissive, condescending moment, and then looked back at the throngs of gathered onlookers and forced a smile. George and Josiah felt that cold glance almost like a rainy night at sea. But the chill was fleeting as they once again looked at Ella and felt a warm tingling all over. Needless to say, both fell for her immediately. And so they ran after the long and colourful procession from the station to where the circus camp would soon be erected, and finally caught up with the fat man, who was said to own the circus. It was hard for our hopeful heroes to hide their willingness to do just about anything, so long as they could be near this astonishing acrobat. Once again, they found themselves lying about their age and experience, boasting about skills, strength, and youth that neither possessed. They were nothing if not fine liars, and so were hired on the spot.
I knew that our resume didn't exactly boast a lot of circus experience, but I also knew that there was little that the two of us couldn't do when put to the test.
In the past, when put in these challenging situations, it's really interesting how much our charm and our charisma
Wins the day.
every time.
And given that we had sailed together, that we had gone overboard together, how hard could a trapeze act be, for example?
I often look at you on stage. Obviously, there's a true magic in who you are and what you do. But to then take that into actual magic, and maybe you saw me in half and then I suddenly appear whole again, and the audience are taken aback, and we both bow, and the glory is there, and the lights are shining, and the music and the strings and everything is just creating the most incredible evening for these incredibly lucky audience members.
And so we presented several of these ideas when we went to try to see if they would hire us.
Their official role was utility men, which, though it has a different connotation now, implied at the time that they were willing and able to perform any task required. So they rolled up their shirt sleeves and strapped tool belts to their checkered trousers. At the outset, the job entailed a good deal of basic manual labour, though, of course, none of it was basic to either George or Josiah.
When I think about our time in the circus, really mostly what I remember is the backside of the elephants.
We turn up, we've got a very big bag of skills,
And a head full of dreams.
we end up stood behind these filthy grey behemoths, chucking out more excrement than you've ever seen in your life, steaming piles of
You
it.
cannot imagine until you're there how much comes out of the backside holes of those elephants.
Rolling your sleeves up wasn't enough. We had to be jetted down by a hose at the end of the day.
But it did little to get the smell out of my hair, my mustache, from my fingernails.
Ugh.
It was nothing like the circus I had dreamed of.
Josiah in particular struggled with some of the more physical demands, and George perspired in the humidity like a horse in heat.
Well, and it wasn't just the elephants. Be honest, we weren't doing it that well, and so they reassigned us to other things, each job harder than the one before it. We had to dig holes, drive tent stakes, build risers. I didn't know how to do any of this.
We had to paint signs. We had to repair various hoops and poles. We had to test the safety nets. These were all really hard days of labour. And if you look at Josiah's hands, he's been dealt the softer jobs in life. It was interesting because I'm made of much hardier stuff, and I watched him struggle, and often the day for me was not just about the tasks I had to do, but also supporting my weaker brother.
Neither of us was admittedly that skilled at any of these tasks, but if one of us was working harder and more effectively, it certainly was not you.
That's because I spent most of the time picking you up, giving you water when you'd had enough, loosening your scarf when you looked so hot you were going to expire.
As might be expected, they did their jobs with the determination and focus of, well, gossipy schoolgirls. Giddy from the sounds of the camels and the circus band, from the sights of the trapeze artists, the tightrope walkers, and of course obsessed with a certain young acrobat, every job took far longer than it should have, and most tasks had to be redone by someone else. But despite it all, the lads were liked almost universally by the rest of the cast and crew. Even if their work was consistently subpar, they did every job with smiles on their faces. And naturally they sang songs while they worked, which not only lightened everyone's spirits who heard them, but also drew crowds who would gather to listen. Ella would often stand on the edge of the onlookers, and even she couldn't help but smile when she heard them sing.
Close all of the schools, 'cause the circus is coming to town. The tent stakes are deep in the ground for the band and the clowns. She was short but so perfectly formed, freckled cheeks and sweet marigold hair, spinning light as she twirled through the air. You should have seen her up there.
Indeed, the only one who didn't appear amused by their antics or moved by their music was Mario, the mustachioed master of ceremonies. It was he who often found the fault in their work and reported it to management. He got increasingly red in the face when people mentioned some charming anecdote about the lads, and he did his best to disperse any group that surrounded them.
Oh, go on, get back to work.
He'd shout.
There's work to be done, you lazy fools.
As the date of the first performance drew nearer, more and more bizarre tasks were required of them. The requests started small, but then escalated into the absurd. Maybe it was that each and every piece and part of the operation required a final test before the circus could begin. Maybe it was the dwindling workforce as one after another good man was lost to liquor and the many temptations of that great city of sin. Or maybe it was just the growing jealousy of Mario influencing the powers that be. He had grown ever more disgusted by the day with the boys and wanted once and for all to be rid of our now imperiled pair.
Whatever the reason, as soon as we had a moment of peace to watch Ella practicing her pirouettes or stretching her incredibly nimble body, we'd hear,
Get up, you two. You're needed in the elephant tent.
We'd report to the circus manager and learn that our next task was to stand on the backs of the elephants so that they could get accustomed to the weight and pressure of adult feet and bodies on their backs.
So up we went while the elephants were paraded around in circles. It's not much easier than staying upon the back of a bull. George was constantly falling off and being thrown to the ground. Later, it was the high line.
Up on the wire.
And so we were raised onto the high line and suspended by hooks to test the wire's integrity.
Now jump into that pool, you fools!
We had to plunge into this tiny pool from a plank 30 meters up. After that, it was
Off to the lion's cage, you idiots!
we had to sit in the lion's cage while it ate the carcass of an antelope.
But perhaps the worst demand was when we were told to trade our hats for helmets so that we could be fired out of the barrel of a cannon.
Someone needs to verify the cannon's range.
We were told. Of course, we had no training or preparation for any of these tasks, and so almost all of what we did ended in near disaster.
But ultimately, our durable duo prevailed. No doubt they came away battered and bruised, and they were terrified a great deal of the time, but they didn't die. And all the while, through one absurd act after another, they managed to capture the eye and maybe even the heart of Ella, who watched with amused amazement as the boys willingly did what very few sane adults would even consider, somehow managing to not only hold on to their lives, but their humour, and also their hats and pocket squares for the most part.
The night before the first performance felt like Christmas Eve. The energy in the air along the Gulf Coast was palpable.
The crickets were unusually loud that evening. Children couldn't sleep. Grown-ups couldn't sleep. Even the feral alley cats were acting edgier than normal.
You could hear them fighting or mating or doing whatever alley cats do the night before a circus begins. The whole city seemed to be counting down the hours.
Needless to say, neither Josiah nor I could sleep either. Of course, our thoughts were on Ella.
She gave us such a big smile before she left the tent that afternoon.
As our agitated allies lay wide awake beneath the darkening sky, guessing at their long odds of wooing and ideally winning their petite princess, they noticed that the oil lamp in Ella's caravan was still burning. Could it be she was sleeplessly thinking of them as well? After giving each other a long pep talk, they finally rose to their feet, held each other by the shoulders, breathed a deep, nervy breath, gave each other a solid, stinging slap on the cheek, and then they turned to call on her. Ella had a string of copper bells dangling from her window, and they lightly swung it to see if she might want to join them on a stroll to the water's edge. The boys hadn't had many moments alone with her, but for almost 10 days now they had watched her every move. And for the past 3 days, she had been watching them with increasing interest as well. And, well, let's face it, she had heard them sing. Still, the butterflies multiplied as they waited for what seemed like a month to see if she would answer, and they nearly turned away and fled several times to hide behind the moss of the live oaks. But at long last, she opened the door. She wore a silk chemise that barely covered the curve of her backside, and Josiah had to swallow back a gasp when she smiled bashfully, turned, and let them inside. They awkwardly asked if they might escort her out for the evening. She coyly consented, and then stepped through a curtain of beads to change into something more appropriate.
It was a night we would never forget, and we thought of it so many times on many a lonely evening for many years hence.
Our little threesome walked from the camp, Ella in the middle, arms linked on either side, beneath the iron-railed balconies and the great magnolia trees of that wild and wonderful city.
A muted trumpet played from a few streets away. The moon was bright, and we were bathed in silver as we reached the coast of Lake Pontchartrain. Ella giggled and blushed as we told her stories of our travels. She swooned when beneath a gas lamp we sang for her, and only her. And though shy at first, she soon opened up.
I was abandoned on the streets of Warsaw when I was just a little girl.
She told us.
The ladies of her lenient law took me in. The nuns became my guardians. They were so hard on me.
As she spoke, she began to tremble.
I had hours of chores to do every day. No one to play with. I had terrible nightmares. I wanted to run away all the time. But it wasn't until 9 years ago, when I was 12, and the circus came to Warsaw, that I saw my chance. The nuns certainly forbid my going, but I snuck out anyways. I was always small, even smaller than I am now.
She giggled.
So it was easy to slip away, and once I was there, I hid in the crowd. Then I hid on the train, leaving town after the circus was over. The master of ceremonies, you know Mario, he discovered me on the train heading west, just beyond city limits. He would see you first learned that I was double-jointed on almost all my joints. He and I made the plan to find a way to let me stay. I was raised on the road, really, on the outskirts of one great city after another, performing for packed tents besides the most wonderfully strange group of people.
We listened with a mixture of awe and emotion. We didn't know what to say except that we felt grateful she'd gotten away and fortunate to have found her. Then we took her to Maybelline's music hall and toasted to courage and survival and to Apollo, the god of dance.
An 8-piece brass band wailed away in the corner of the hall, and the three of us stepped onto the floor surrounded by an exuberant and sweaty crowd. We danced and held each other close.
We whispered into each other's ears. We spun and shook and got lost in the energy of the music and the room, in the magic of the night, as every last one of our inhibitions melted away.
And I'll tell you, if I may, I'm jealous of all three of them. How they moved together, how their bodies became one. Of course, I could not have let go like they let go. I never can let go. And that's partly why I'm here, with my notes, a brochure about caskets, a closet full of Murdoch's medicated paper, and this microphone. And the sons of Town Hall are, well, I don't know where they are at the moment. Sailing around the Horn of Africa, perhaps, and singing for the world. Sorry, I digress. Where was I? As George, Josiah, and Ella moved to the intoxicating music, it seemed the bass drum was the only timepiece, and that real time was suspended. Those three felt they could dance forever. But then their eyes were struck by a startling sight. The first rays of sun cut through the glass of Maybelline's oval windows, catching George and Josiah straight in the pupils. It was a shock, a confusing and cruel jolt back to reality. It turned out the bass drum was not the only timepiece. Time, in fact, was not suspended at all.
We had danced the entire night. Dawn had broke, and with it came the realization that we had shattered our curfew rule on the night before the big day.
If we didn't somehow manage to sneak back undetected, all would be ruined. And so we took Ella by the arm and ran quickly through the crowd and out into the harsh light of day.
Well, well, well. It seems that I, too, have lost track of time. And so let us leave them there, racing back through the streets of New Orleans at dawn on opening day, hoping against hope that they might make it back to their camp undetected. Join us next time as we find out what happened as the momentous day unfolded. The crowd streamed in, the lights flicked on, and the greatest show on earth began.
New Orleans, open your shutters and doors, please. Come out on the balconies, wide-eyed mystery for 3 nights only. New Orleans, open your shutters and doors, please. Come out on the balconies, come and join me for 3 nights only. Come and join me for 3 nights only.
I am and will always be Elias B. Worthington, your host for Madmen Cross the Water, the adventures of the Sons of Town Hall. As always, keep your letters coming. Links to the Sons of Town Hall website and social media can be found in the episode description.
To support Madmen Cross the Water, go to patreon.com/Sons of Town Hall.